So during today's session, hopefully we will hear from three presenters, each of them providing a different perspective on health in Europe, food systems, aging population, and air pollution and their impact on health. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Florian Freund from the Thunen Institute of Market Analysis, presenting on a health and food system analysis of Brexit-related policy approaches. The floor is yours, Florian.
So thank you very much, Susanna. I will start to share my screen now. So I hope you can see my presentation now. Perfect. Today I will present some research on diet-related health consequences of post-Brexit policy reforms in the UK. And this is joint work with Marcus Brickman from the Oxford Martin School and the Nuffield Department of Population Health at the University of Oxford. So when you think about Brexit and food, there are many food-related implications a Brexit might have. So probably the most salient one are the likely interruptions in food supply. So if you think about the press, last year there was a lot of articles about lorries queuing at the border, which is especially problematic for perishable food. But also food will become more expensive, and this is even the case under the current scheme where we have no tariffs between the EU and the UK through the Brexit negotiations. But there will, of course, be the so-called non-tariff costs that will increase due to differences in red tape between the UK and the EU and through customs controls and border checks and so on. But also UK farmers could suffer from Brexit, especially if they are export-oriented. This is the case since the EU will have some trade costs on UK imports, and there might also be a shortage of foreign labor, which is especially harmful for the horticulture sector, so if you think about fruit pickers and so on. And so all these aspects finally have implications for diet-related health risks in the UK, and this is the direction of our research. So we're looking at diet-related health risks of several Brexit options. Outside the European Union, the UK is of course not bound to EU policies anymore, and this has several implications. So one is on the trade policy side. So outside the European Union, the UK can negotiate trade agreements with whatever country they choose, which is not possible within the European Union. And they do not stick to the European Common Agricultural Policy anymore. And the UK has already announced that they will follow agricultural support scheme that is more in line with public money for public goods approach than, for example, the European CAP is at the moment. And in the following, we will consider several health-sensitive policy reforms with regard to trade policies and agriculture policies. So the plan of the talk is as follows. So I will start with showing you some hopefully interesting trade statistics of the UK. Then I will briefly explain the Brexit scenarios that we are looking at and the modeling framework that we used. And then we will, of course, have a look at the outcomes, so on the agricultural markets and on the diet-related health effects. And then I will close my talk with a short conclusion. So here you can see a rather long chart of both imports and exports of agricultural products of the United Kingdom with the rest of the world. And you can see that in the very beginning, in the 60s and 70s, beginning 70s, both imports and exports were not really large. But then around the beginning of the 70s, both exports and imports seems to accelerate and had even stronger increases here later on. So it's quite interesting that you can observe that in the 60s, the evolution was rather flat. And then around 1973, you can see that both imports and exports are starting to increase. And it's not a coincidence that this is happening around 73. So as you might remember, this is the year of the accession to the European Union of the United Kingdom. And with the result that tariffs were abolished between the EU and the UK. And since then, we can observe more and more trade. And with the increasing creation of the common market, there were even larger decreases in trade costs. So this led to a strong intensification. And in 2018, the UK is a large net importer of agri-food products, with net imports of about 25 billion pounds. So from an economic perspective, this is not really something to worry about. It's just it shows us that the division of international labor is functioning quite well. But this might be a problem, of course, if you are once in a sudden increasing trade barriers or introducing trade barriers. And then this might be harmful to consumers, which are very reliant on imports for food. Just to give you an idea where the imports of agri-food products are sourced from, those arrows are pointing to that direction. And you can see that most of the imports are coming from the European Union. Also, there are some imports from the United States and China, for example, but the most are coming from the European Union. And also here with the top 10 import countries, you can see that 9 of them are from the European Union. Also, only the United States are here in the top 10. Very similar on the export side. So the UK is exporting most of the agricultural food products to the European Union. And some of the exports are also going to other countries. But again, if you look at the top 10 of export destinations, 8 of them are from the European Union and only 2 are from outside of the European Union. So the EU is the most important trading partner of the UK in agri-food products. And having a look from a perspective of the sectors, the black bars are the imports and the blue bars are the exports. You can see that also across different products, the UK is a net importer for basically every product, and especially for horticulture products, because there are other regions in the world that have better geography for growing horticulture than the UK. But you see that increasing or erecting trade barriers in food is quite, should have some impact for the UK, so to say. So in this analysis, we were looking into 4 scenarios. So first of all, we have a soft Brexit scenario, which is now the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is in place since January this year. So this implies that there are no tariffs between the EU and the UK, but of course there are increases in non-tariff barriers due to differences in red tape and border controls and so on. Then we have a global trade scenario, which is also sometimes known as Global Britain approach, where the UK uses its close ties to former colonies in the Commonwealth countries and the USA. And there we assume free trade between the UK and the US and Commonwealth countries. So this is reciprocal free trade. Then we are looking into so-called health-sensitive tariff reform, where the UK applies 0 tariffs to health-sensitive foods like fruits and vegetables unilaterally for all countries. This is also something that is now possible outside the European Union. And finally, we are looking into subsidy reforms, so where agricultural subsidies are reformed in line with a public money for public goods approach, where money is made or the payments are made conditions on providing healthy foods. So we are incentivizing production of healthy products like fruits, vegetables, and nuts, for example. And this is just to some more detail on the soft Brexit scenario. So the blue areas are all areas where the EU has negotiated free trade agreements in the past. And when the UK was leaving the European Union, those trade agreements of the EU were not simply rolled over to the UK, but the UK had to renegotiate all of those trade agreements. They have not done this yet, but they have put some effort in it. So the yellow bars indicate that those regions have already been rolled over to the United Kingdom. As you might know, there's also Japan and Mexico right now are rolled over, but at the time we were doing the study, this was not the case. So we did not include them. And the UK is also has ongoing negotiations with Australia, which we did also not consider for our analysis. The modeling approach is as follows. So we are using basically two models. So one economic model where we have all the agricultural market effects of the various policies we are looking at. And then we have a comparative health risk assessment model where we analyze the health effects of those policies. And for the economic model, we are using the magnet model, which is basically a derivative of the GTAP model with more agricultural detail. So for example, there is more detail in land modeling, and there are more sectors for bioenergy and bioelectricity, for example, but also for feeding animals, there is more detail. And there's also an agricultural policy module where that allows us to manipulate the structure of the agricultural policies in the UK. And an outcome of the magnet model that we are looking at is consumption, so changes in consumption and production and trade. And the consumption changes are then linked as dietary changes to the comparative health risk assessment model. And the comparative health risk assessment model takes these changes in diets and maps them to diet-related risk factors. So I will tell a little bit more about this later on. But those diet-related risk factors are then mapped to disease endpoints, and the final outcome is changes in mortality rates that result from those policy changes. Okay, then let me show you the results. So here are the changes on production, exports, imports, and consumption. Associated, for example, with a soft Brexit here on the top left. So you can see that trade flows are largely shrinking due to non-tariff measures between the EU and the UK. So imports are largely decreasing for beef, dairy, and wheat, and pork, for example. And as a counter effect, there is, for the decreasing imports, there's also an increase in production for those products. And for the global trade scenario here in the B panel, you can see quite a change. So there's a lot of imports that are increasing, for example, for beef, wheat, and pork, which are basically sourced from the USA and Australia. The tariff reform in panel C, you can see that there are not large differences with respect to our soft Brexit scenario, but for example, the horticultural imports are reduced by half compared to our soft Brexit scenario. So there's there's more imports of horticultural products relative to our soft Brexit scenario. And in the subsidy reform, so where money of agriculture subsidies are made conditional on providing horticultural products, you can see that production is increasing, but also that some of these increased production is exported because exports are increasing as well. So let me now come to the final results concerning the health effects. So here we have a picture where we have the changes in mortality between those scenarios. and for different dietary risks. So there are 3 weight-related risk factors that are considered. So an increase in obesity, in overweight and underweight is all increasing mortality rates. Also an increase in red meat consumption, though this is red meat and processed meat, will also lead to more mortality, whereas an increase in fish, legumes, nuts, fruits and vegetables is associated with a decrease in mortality. And if you have a look at the left panel, so to the soft Brexit, you can see that there are 2 counterbalancing effects. So due to the tariffs, there's less food available in the United Kingdom. So due to non-tariff measures, to be precise, and especially there's less fruit and vegetables available. So we have a decrease in the consumption of fruits and vegetables, which is increasing mortality rates, right? But on the other hand, we have because food is becoming more expensive and incomes are lowered, people in the UK are eating less calories, which has a positive effect because this led to a reduction in obesity rates in the UK. So these are 2 opposing effects, but the net effect is still that we have an increase in mortality rates in the UK of about 500 persons per year. And then if you have a look at the next column, to the global trade, this is the scenario where we're looking at a global, that the UK is negotiating free trade with the US and Commonwealth countries. And quite interestingly, you can see that also in relation to our soft Brexit, the additional mortality to a lower consumption of fruit and vegetables is somehow lower than in the soft Brexit. But now we have a larger effect on obesity and red meat consumption, which is due to the fact that although the UK, by negotiating free trade with the US and Commonwealth, have more food available now than before, the food that they are importing is more energy dense and not really the healthy food, but more like red meat and wheat and so on. And this increased the obesity prevalence in the UK, which had actually more negative effects than the soft Brexit. So it's like 3 times as large than only soft Brexit if we have also a global trade agreement. For the health-sensitive tariff reform, so abolishing tariffs for fruit and vegetables, this reduced the additional mortality associated with fruit and vegetable consumption. And so there's really a balancing of a reduction in obesity. So the net effect on mortality is rather 0. And if we combine soft Brexit with the subsidy reform, which promotes the production of healthy foods, we can see that the additional mortality rate is negative, which implies that we have a reduction in mortality rate. So this can lead to net positive effects in terms of health. So then we were also, until now, we were looking into those policies alone, but in reality, it might be the case that there are some combinations of those policies, and this is what we have on the right side of the slides here. We were combining those policies, and you can see that in every case when we combine in global trade with another policy, this still will increase mortality rates. But if we combine health-sensitive tariff reforms and subsidy reforms, this will lead to a rather large decrease in mortality rates in the UK. So let me conclude. So we found that soft Brexit could lead to increased diet-related mortality because food will become less available, and especially the UK has a very large import dependency on fruit and vegetables. So there's a relatively large effect here on reduced consumption of fruit and vegetables and nuts. A global Britain approach with more free trade with the US and Australia and all other Commonwealth countries would even lead to a worse health outcome, because there are then even more mortality rates in the UK. But a health-sensitive tariff and domestic support reform could mitigate these negative effects and even turn them into positive health effects. So to conclude, the UK needs nutrition-sensitive trade policy and subsidy reforms to improve dietary health in the UK, and this is something that they can do since they're still in an ongoing process of negotiating trade agreements and negotiating their agricultural support schemes. So thank you very much, and I'm happy for your questions.
Thank you very much, Florian. So now let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. As a reminder, please enter all questions and comments in the chat. I don't see any message so far.
I guess Daniel is raising his hand. I just see this.
Yeah. Daniel, please use the chat system. Okay, so Daniel is asking if he's pointing out that the household demand system will be very crucial to your results. Have you tested the sensitivity of results to that?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So we have we were using this the CDE demand system and GTAP, which is a little bit adjusted in the magnet model to take care of income developments that might cause some problematic issues when we have baseline projections in the future. We did not really change the demand system, but what I did was like using some other elasticities, especially for fruit and vegetables, to test how the system reacts to changes in those elasticities.
Great, thank you. And we also have one more question from Danielle. How many regions do you have in your model? I'm interested to know which country are the exporter of the UK.
Yeah, so we were, I have not in mind how many regions are this exactly, but we use the UK as one region, of course, and the rest of the European Union as one region. And then we had like every Commonwealth country that is available in the GTAP database as a single country. And we were using like appropriate aggregates. So for example, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, Asia is one aggregate, and so on, South America. Yeah, and of course we have more information about the bilateral trade flows that are of interest. But yeah, for this publication, for this talk, I was just showing the overall results.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question from Uris Baldos, who is congratulating you on the presentation. A question is food waste incorporated in your framework?
Yeah, we did incorporate food waste, so ex post, so not direct in the model, but afterwards. And this is only the food waste of the consumer side, so to say, not on the process and production stage.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Daniela, one more question. I saw that red meat affects significantly the result of mortality rates. Could you please explain more about this?
Yeah, I can try this. So what we were using in the comparative health risk assessment model is based on meta-analysis of medical studies that kind of analyzed how an additional consumption of red meat affects the possibility of getting a specific disease, so to say. And there is some strong evidence that, for example, eating a lot of red meat, for example, is likely to cause colorectal cancer. And those information are part of this health risk assessment model, the epidemiological evidence, so to say.
I actually have also one question. I would be interested to know more how you implemented the soft Brexit scenario, because it is in fact a free trade scenario, but we still see quite an important negative impact on the consumption of fruits and vegetables. So is this all driven by NTMs? And how do you, what assumptions are you taking on NTMs? How do you model them, or do you know a little bit? Can you
so exactly, there are no traditional tariffs that we are imposing in line with the free trade agreement between the EU and the UK. So we were only changing non-tariff measures or non-tariff costs, and we have done this by changing bilateral trade efficiency. So this is like a iceberg transportation cost, like an efficiency loss in trade. And to come up with the numbers, we were using a study by Joseph Francois et al., and they were looking into the consequences or the non-tariff measures between the US and the European Union, and adjusted them somehow to fit to UK-EU trade. So this is, of course, a rather rough estimate, but this is what several other studies are using that are looking at Brexit in a CGE model framework. But we also use this information. This is rather rough because we have like only one non-tariff measure for food and agriculture. So they might, of course, differ for several food types, but yeah, we did not have more information about this, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm asking because we are also currently working on a study on Brexit in respect to fisheries. So
Great.
Good to know if there are some more newer, updated estimations of the NTMs in the agri-food chain. But yeah, I know that there are these other studies, and we'll probably have to implement them as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to share any sources and experiences about this.
Yeah. Maybe I'll be in touch. Thank you. Well, I don't see more. Anybody else? Yes, we have still a question from Uris. Are there plans to incorporate healthcare costs to the outcomes?
This is really interesting topic. So we have not done this yet. So we have no connection between the health and the economy side, so to say. But I have thought about this, of course. And I have no idea how the healthcare sector is implemented in the GTAP database, if there is kind of a connection. So I know that there are some studies that do this kind of outside the GTAP model. So they kind of there are kind of rough estimates that one can use, like but I'm not really sure. So we have one scenario where we kind of we have the mortality rates in the model, and we have also information about the age structure of the mortality. So we could adjust the workforce in the GTAP model, for example. I don't know if this has kind of some implications for the healthcare sector, if this is included in the GTAP database, but I would happy to talk about this a little bit more, because this is also something that I think is really interesting.
Okay, thank you. I think we can close this discussion, and actually this brings a very good bridge for our second presenter, who is here. It's very good. Who is going to talk a bit much more about healthcare, and that is Juha Honkatukia from Finnish National Institute for Health and Welfare, and he will present a paper on to have and have not, evaluating the costs and benefits of the welfare state with an HEE model of Finland with intergenerational accounting. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, or whatever time of the day it might be where you are. I'm coming from the National Institute for Health and Welfare, as the Finnish text is suggesting. My good friend and colleague is from the Kela, the Finnish Pension Alliance, and this project has a sort of a background of common interests that go way back, but basically they stem from the idea that Finland is a representative of what is known as the Nordic model of a welfare state, which means that many services which are not free in most countries are free, or practically free in the Nordic countries, Finland included. So that includes especially healthcare and social care, which in practical terms is a kind of you can think of it as a gift from the government. But Finland, as most European countries, are experiencing a period where the population is aging quite rapidly, and in Finland, I think it's happening a little bit sooner than in most of the Central European countries. So obviously, if you have a publicly funded system with the increasing costs ahead and less contributors to the system to be sort of expected, that puts a pressure on the economy and on the welfare model. So our interest stems from the fact that we can sort of foresee that some changes are due to the pension system or the funding of it, or also to the provision of this practically free healthcare services. And that's the reason we started quite a while ago working on putting together a model which would be able to sort of tackle the welfare issues and then the economic efficiency issues and the fiscal issues of an aging population in the context of the welfare state and the pension system as well. It's also about the welfare, especially outcomes to different generations of things. The way that this is we are using quite a bit of register data, and I'll run through some of the registers that we have. One of the core registers actually comes from the National Institute of Health and Welfare, where what we have is register data on the costs of providing health and social care. Basically, per person, it's a register of all the treatments that are being given, and where we get the data that enables us to.
Excuse me, to interrupt. The connection is a bit broken. Maybe would it be possible that for now you are going to stop the video and we only see the screen? I don't know
yes,
if that
I'll do that. I think the reason might be that we are about to be in the middle of a thunderstorm over here. Yes, but I'll try and. No? Is it any better now? Susanna?
Yes, well, let's see. It's difficult. Yeah, I hope it's better.
Yeah, okay. I'll keep going, and then please give a holler if you can't hear me. Yeah, so that's one of the registers. And the other register is a pension register, which allows us to exactly model the accrual of pensions and then the pensions that are being paid out. We can also model the sustainability of the pension system. And we have similar register on quite a few of the other social income transfers that they accrue to different generations of kids. So that's basically the idea in this project. What we do is we put combine all of this register data in a dynamic model of the Finnish economy, which is based on very well-known models like the Monash and usage model. And then we aggregated it to a level of something like CPA12 that allows us to use household income surveys to sort of model the budget constraints of each of the generations. So that sort of completes the description of the economy. The policies that we are thinking about are not quite there, not all of them. We have a hunch of what they might be like, and our idea is to sort of provide a model that will be able to tackle these issues once they become topical in some time. So we have a health extension basically, which models the idea that people are going to. This has to do with national accounts. The extension is about allocating the public provision of healthcare services to each of the generations of Finns, or yearly cohorts, if you will. And to do that, you have to modify the model a little bit because the idea is that this free gift of healthcare and social care services is going to affect all of the consumption, expenditure, and the behavior of the households. But it's not something that you can get out of regular national accounts. So you have to bring the data from outside and do a bit of a modification. And that gives us the ability to sort of toy with ideas like one of our policies. That we want to sort of track what the households will do if somebody meddles with the script from the government. And then we can track what the welfare effects of all of that is. And this is basically the idea that we're using. So we modify the consumption functions in a way that takes into account this government outlay or this gift from the government, if you will. And then we can say what happens if you do something with that. The register data, as I was mentioning, that we use to sort of allocate this data, this consumption or this gift stems from registers of costs and then treatment per patient, and it covers all of the Finnish population. So it's a genuine register thing. I think there are about 900 different kinds of treatments that are covered in the initial data, but obviously we have to aggregate quite a bit to make it operational in the CG model. Well, the thing that sort of one of the bits of data that's the motivation for what we are doing is that unit costs tend to be a lot higher for older people than younger people, and that means that as the share of the elderly is increasing, the costs are increasing sort of disproportionately. So it's almost like it is a sort of an exponential growth that you see. Right. We can decompose what's the cause of this. This is a picture of the change between 2015 and 2014, so projected change starting from a few years ago from history. So about a third of an increase in the need for care, and 25 percentage point of that is due to the population getting older. So it's a big for Finland. We also can calculate these GDP shares of income transfers, pensions, other benefits, which is a lump of different kinds of household benefits, and the social care and healthcare costs. And then this is the bit that we like to tell people from Ministry of Finance, because it relates directly to the fiscal sustainability bit of these things. So pensions. the Finnish system consists of, first of all, it's statutory, and part of this is funded so that people are contributing to the system as they work, and then the work-related pension that they are entitled to, it depends on their work history and the contributions that they've been making. Why it's important from the fiscal sustainability bit is that's really part of the sustainability calculations. So the public sector defined large, it includes not only the central government and the municipal governments, which are the sort of two layers of government in Finland, but it also includes the pension system or the pension provider. So that's why we are interested in that. The other social security related income transfers, not just social security, there are various kinds of transfers. They are based on national transfer accounts, which my colleague has been elemental in generating for Finland, and that means that we can pretty much tell what different generations are getting from the society, if you will, and how much they are contributing to the society during their working age. So we can immediately track the effects of changing population structure, or the age structure of the population with the help of these accounts. Right, then the policies. Well, we have an idea that there's probably something of a sustainability gap in the Finnish public sector because of this aging. It hasn't been made any less of an issue by the pandemic, but pandemic here and pandemic there. The fundamental reason is still the changing structure of the population. And something like this is probably going to happen, but we don't know the exact form that it's going to be taking. So we just wanted to see that if we want to shave, let's say, 8 billion 8 percentage point out of the expenditure, which is hovering at something like 18 billion a year at the moment. To put that in perspective, in Finland we are about 5.3 million at the moment, so 80 billion is quite a lot. If you want to shave 1 billion per year from the level of that, then that means something like an 8% percentage point cut. The way we study you could do this is by cutting the provision of these healthcare services, or you could also increase taxation, for example, the payroll taxes to contribute to the fiscal sustainability. So we are not, in a way, we are not closing the budget. We are not giving this money back to the consumers, because the idea is that there's sustainability gap that needs to be sort of taken care of, and this 1 billion is contributing to that. So we are paying off government debts, if you will, with this money. And what we want to see here is which one is better for the economy. Is the difference between the two, and we also want to sort of be able to identify the cohorts of Finns that are affected by these policies. So our premise is that there's going to be a difference in the sort of distributional difference between these two policies. Let's put it that way. And the results are here. If you got $1 billion now and from in the level, then this is what it does to consumption. The demand side growth contributions actually of the economy. That's what this picture is about. So the overall effect is something like 2 percentage points of GDP, starting from the date that we introduced this cut. And the major part of the effect stems actually from consumption demand decreasing. So the idea of this free gift is if you take 1 billion away from the free gift, then it's directly going to affect not only the healthcare demand of the individuals, but all else consumption as well. So you're basically, by cutting the expenditure, you're taking $1 billion away from the households. and they have to adjust. And one of the major things that they do is that they consume less. But it's also because now you are reducing the domestic absorption. It means that domestic output will also be a little bit smaller, to the tune of 1.5 or 2% over time. Most of that is due to decrease in capital, or the contribution of capital to GDP growth. We have an idea, which I think we do mention in the updated paper, that this is something that's very difficult to communicate to decision makers. If you have cohorts of Finns and you want to in a simple picture what's happening to the overall welfare of the population, it's kind of demanding. What we do is we use an index of the welfare changes over these generations. Excuse me, I have to close the window. Yes, we are now in the middle of a thunderstorm over here. But we window because we didn't want to let it in. Yes, so the idea is that if you are Ruotsi and if you are sort of worried about the effects on the least well-off of the population, then this is going to be reducing the welfare by something like 15 to 20%. If you're just worried about the little people or something like that. But if you are a utilitarian, you're only interested about the averages, then the welfare loss is a lot smaller. So this is the choice that we can sort of demonstrate to the decision maker that if you care about the least well-off, then it looks like a very bad idea. But the average effects are not that big. We can also pick on the cohorts. This is 50-year-olds. What happens with them is that the pension accrual is affected to an extent by this cut on the government gift. Consumption of health services is decreased, and the overall consumption is decreased a little bit more. So that demonstrates the idea that if you cut on this free gift, then you are actually going to be affecting all of the consumption of the individuals. If you look at 75-year-olds, they don't get any wage income, so pension accrual and things like that are not really much of an issue. But they are much more dependent on these healthcare gifts, if you will, from the government. So they'll be a lot more affected than the 50-year-olds. And if you go into I didn't go to 85-year-olds, but in the paper there's a picture of 85-year-old cohorts, then they'll be still more affected by this cut in the gift. Well, the payroll tax, the effect on the macroeconomy seems to be a little bit smaller than it is from these healthcare expenditure cuts. What we do here is we still take the 1 billion away the first year, and then we don't do anything else with the. There's going to be an investment as well.
Juha, are you still there? We don't hear anything. There is no sound. Okay, seems we lost our presenter. Maybe we wait a bit.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you now, but I had an impression we lost you for a while.
Yes,
is that correct?
yeah, we lost electricity because of the thunderstorm.
Oh, okay.
But now we are back and we are fully mobile now, so it should be okay.
So please continue. I only
Okay,
see that I got frozen, but don't worry about it. I'm still here, but I will have to stop my video. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the point with this is that the macroeconomic effects from this payroll tax hike are smaller than from the healthcare cut. But it's also the case that and so are the welfare effects, if you will. But if you look at the sort of distributional effects of these policies, then they're very different, because the payroll tax hike is something that's going to be affecting the active generations. So now we have a case where the effects are larger for them, but a lot smaller for the non-active or the older generations, because these generations are not working anymore. They're just so they are dependent on the welfare state, if you will, and not so much on what's happening with the taxation and so on. And that actually is where we are at the moment. So there's an ongoing big reform of the healthcare system in Finland, which is not taking away the welfare state, but it's sort of redefining the provision of these services. And the central government is going to be more directly responsible for the funding of these services than heretofore. But at the same time, there's this general idea that this reform will enable to also make things more efficient. And I have a hunch that means that it's also going to mean that they probably will be saving some of the services away, or making, for example, people pay for them to a bigger extent than heretofore. So something like this is going to happen, and when it does happen, or when it's been planned, we want to be sort of ready to do this sort of an analysis, which, in our understanding, the existing models won't be able to do. So that's basically where we are at. So we are sort of gradually putting a little bit more detail on the model, and then we're just waiting for the angle for the policy relevant analysis. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll stop sharing this now.
Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation, despite some problems with the connection. So now we are moving to discussion session. Please again put your questions in the chat. I see no question yet. Yes, so we have a question here from Ulrich Baldos. What is driving the increase in labor supply after cutting healthcare expenditure? It was slide 20 probably.
I think it's just an income effect. If people are getting, I mean, we have a neoclassical labor supply function there. So if you take away from the households, they become poorer, and that means that they'll consume less of leisure as well.
Okay. Maybe I can ask a question. So when you cut the expenditures on health, we see that immediately in reduced consumption. And then how is this reflected in the health situation or status of the household or the population? You showed us the utility. Is it then brought into the welfare, or do you have some concrete indicators of health in your model?
That's a good question. We haven't included them yet, but the National Institute for Health and the Welfare is also calculating the sort of risks of disease. So if you just sort of generally cut these expenditures, we are not being particular about what kind of treatments, but one might easily think that sort of preemptive care would be one of the things that's easier to cut than let's say emergency care. And if you did that, then the presumption probably would be that it would have a negative effect on health. So we have these risk coefficients at our disposal, but we haven't actually put them in the model yet.
Thank you. We have a question from Daniel. Do you have more details? Which sector are more affected by the cut on health expenditure?
Well, yes, but we didn't include it in the presentation, so I won't be able to offhand to give you a detailed answer on that. If you want to, please send an email and then we can look them up.
Okay, thank you.
If I may speculate, I think in the consumption demand system, or it's a linear expenditure function. The income elasticities of services tend to be higher than they are for necessities and so forth. So my guess is that what's happening is that provision of services like tourism and some such thing is going to be hit harder than well, demand for food, example.
Okay. All right. It seems that we have used all questions in the chat. Well, if there are no more questions, then thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you. And we can move to our last speaker, Daniel Ostale-Valriberas from OECD, who is going to present on the economic consequences of air pollution policies in Arctic Council countries, a sectoral analysis. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we hear you.
Yes. Yes. The
Yes?
sheet is not sharing yet. I only see the pop-up. Oh, there you go. There
Okay,
you go.
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Great. I will put full screen. Perfect. I think we're ready. So good morning to everyone, or good afternoon. Today I will present the economic consequences of air pollution policies in Arctic Council countries, a sectoral analysis. Please remind that this is a team effort together with Elisa Lancy from the OECD Environment Directorate. So just to give you some context, so air pollution is one of the most severe environmental risks in the world. But it is especially crucial in the Arctic region because it's vital to preserve the balance of global climate. And this region is very sensitive to short-lived climate pollutant, notably black carbon. So for this reason, the Arctic Council countries set a goal to reduce black carbon emission 25 to 33% by 2025 relative to 2013 levels. However, they need to reduce this and other pollutants in an effective way in order to reduce the negative socioeconomic impact that achieving this goal has. So the objective of this report is to highlight the cost and benefit of emission reduction in the different Arctic Council countries by sector, in order to analyze how policies in the different sector contribute to reduce health, environment, and economic consequences of air pollution. What we do is we compare mainly two scenarios. One is the baseline scenario, and the other one is a technical maximum feasible reduction scenario, which is implemented by sector. So what we do at the end is to compare each scenario with the baseline in a time horizon of 2050. The outline of the presentation starts with a methodology and a scenario. After I continue with some results in emission and investment in the Arctic Council countries. And finally, I will go with some preliminary results in the economic consequences. Okay.
Daniel, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Which slide are you on? Because we're still on the first slide.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I will stop. Oh my. Okay. No, I was ready. Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's all right. So maybe turn off your video and then.
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that. Let me share again.
Yeah.
I will share my screen. So
okay. Yep. Methodology and scenarios.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Good.
Perfect. Yeah. I will go pretty fast. It's exactly what I said. Okay. So it's the context, the objectives. Just remind the two policies that are most important that we will take sectoral, and after the results. So then let me continue with the methodology. So this methodology relies in a suite of models, but the main model tool is the OECD EMV linkages model. EMV linkage is a multi-regional and multi-sectoral computable general equilibrium model, which have a global perspective of the economy. In the model, all the regional economy are part of a closed system connected by trade and production between regions. The model searches for a simultaneous equilibrium in all markets together year by year. This is how the projections are created. At the beginning, the model is run without taking into account the air pollution damage that we want to study, what is called a non-feedback simulation. And then we include the specific impact of air pollution. Given the characteristic of the model, we can have sectoral and geographical shocks, and this is exactly what we are doing in this report. We are taking exactly the region of the Arctic Council countries that we will see which countries are afterwards in specific sectors. But as we said, even if OECD EMV linkage is the main tool, there are other models implied in the methodology. So first, we start with a non-feedback simulation to create detailed projection of sectoral economic activities. With these economic activities, the EASA's gains model calculates the sectoral emissions of the different air pollutants. The emission of these gases are then used to derive the concentration of PM2.5 and ground level ozone using the European Commission GRC TM-FAST model. The concentration, after we go with the biophysical impact, so the concentration of PM2.5 and ground level ozone are then used to calculate the biophysical impact of air pollution using the global burden of disease for the part of the health impact. And the crop productivity is the impact on crop productivity is directly given by the GRC TM-FAST model. And finally, we calculate the biophysical impact or how we calculate how this biophysical impact affects in macroeconomic point of view using EMV linkages model. These steps are repeated for all the scenarios, and then the health and economic consequences of air pollution are a comparison between the baseline scenario and the scenario where policy action is taking place. So to talk more about the policy scenario, there is mainly two different policy scenarios that after are used in a sectoral point of view. Let me start. So First, we have the current legislation scenario, which is our baseline scenario that considers national and regional laws and regulation on emission, energy efficiency, and climate change taking place until 2017. It is very important to remark that current policy do not imply that emission level will be constant over the time. So there is some regulation that were made in 2017 that affects future emissions in the Arctic Council countries. The second main policy scenario is the maximum technical feasible reduction scenario. Here, we reflect the implementation of source and region-specific technologies which aim to reduce air pollution. Some example of this technology would be end pipe technologies such as filter or catalyst, capture and recovery system, and cleaner and more efficient solid fuel stoves and boilers. So what we do in this report is to compare the CLE scenario and the MTFR scenario when it's only taking place in one specific sector in the Arctic Council countries in order to see the impact disaggregated. So, for example, this are the sector that we are taking into account, agricultural sector. So we see what happened when the maximum technical feasible scenario is taking place only in the agricultural sector, only in the Arctic Council countries, compared with the current legislation scenario. And finally, we have a full implementation of the MTFR techniques in all the sectors together. So taking this policy action have some benefits and costs. So the benefits come from the increase of air quality, which make changes in health and agricultural impact. For example, increasing air quality would increase labor productivity, would reduce health expenditure, and would increase agricultural productivity. However, all these benefits comes with a cost of investment in new technologies, which is included in the EMV linkages model, such as large-scale stationary process combustion or changes in the road and non-road vehicles. So now, if we focus, this is the starting part of the results. In the emission part, what we see is that here we present the share of emissions by sector for each pollutant in the CLE scenario. So what we see is that some sectors are the major emitters of some pollutants. For example, we can see how SO2 is emitted mainly by the energy and industry sector, while NH3 is mainly emitted by the agricultural sector. However, and this is the key component here, is that there are some countries such as Russia, for example, that are very heavily affected by the energy and industry sector in terms of emission levels, while, for example, in Sweden, they are more affected by the residential emissions. And then in the United States, would be more affected by the transport sector. So with this in mind, what we saw is that when policy action is taking place, the reduction is different depending on the sector and the countries. So concentration level of PM2.5 would be reduced more when in Russia, when the policy action is taking place in the industry sector, while in the United States and in Canada, it's highly affected when policy action is taking place in the agricultural sector. In Norway, on the other hand, the emission reduction comes higher when policy action is taking place in the energy sector. So now that we saw what is the effect in terms of emissions, now let's go to the part of the cost and the investment. So to implement fully the MTFR scenario in all the Arctic Council countries, the investment would rise to more than 100 billion, no, a little bit less, sorry, than 100 billion US dollars. But we see that we see here in the graph that is not evenly proportional in terms of sector. So there is some sector that needs more investment, such as energy and residential, and others that need less investment in order to achieve this MTFR scenario. But this is not evenly distributed also by countries. So we see here that investment in Canada will be focused mostly in the residential sector, while in Russia will be more in the energy and industry. And I would like to highlight, because I told this before, in the CLE scenario, there is need still of investment, but we're focusing on the increase of investment made by the MTFR scenario. So now if we merge both investment and emission reduction, we can see that the emission reduction are not necessarily proportional to the sectoral investment. A larger share of investment is devoted to reduce residential and while the largest reduction in the energy sector, for example, for the case of SO2, is in the energy and industry sector. It also makes sense since it is the sector that emits more SO2. So having all of this in mind, let's talk now about the preliminary results in terms of economic analysis. So taking policy action in the Arctic Council country as a whole for all sectors, so it will come with some benefits from increased labor productivity, reduced health expenditure, or increase of agricultural productivity. But this benefit will not come without a cost. So there is an economic cost that increase also over the time. And at the end, the net economic effect in the Arctic Council countries of taking policy action in all sectors is GDP neutral. What we can see here is that the effect is very different and unevenly by countries. For example, in Canada, we see that there is more benefit that, for example, in Russia. And this is in part because Russia is far from their maximum technical feasible reduction technology in terms of air pollution. So they need more investment in order to achieve this maximum technical reduction scenario. And that's why at the end there is a net economic effect that is negative. But now we would like to focus also if there is differences by countries, we can see that there is also differences by sector. Here is a preliminary result of the economic-wide effect. So what before was the X, let me come back, this is the X. So we can see that there is some, in the implementation of policy scenario by sector, there is only 3 sectors that are positive in terms of economic impact, which is the agricultural, energy and industry, and residential sector. And when the Arctic Council is taking these technologies all together. So at the end, we have to take this result on precaution because first, we saw that there is benefit in the entire Arctic Council countries, but might not be, it would happen that for one country is beneficial and for other is costly. And on the other hand, we saw that there is some scenario here, for example, that are negative for the Arctic Council country, but might be positive for one specific country that are part of this region, of these Arctic Council countries. Sorry. So, in summary, what we have is that concentration reduction differ by sector and countries. We just saw that US, for example, have more reduction when they implement policy action in the agricultural sector, while for Russia is more in the industry sector. When we consider the MTFR AC scenario, we see that results depend on sector. There is some sector that lead to benefits, but other leads to cost. This effect might vary by the AC countries. And finally, only the MTFR AC in few sectors is beneficial for all the Arctic Council countries as a whole, is what happened with the agricultural sector. Finally, the full implementation of the MTFR AC overall do not lead into significant effect in terms of economic growth, but, and this is important because it's not part of this report, there is some other positive effect associated to reduction of air pollution, such as increase of welfare. So then we can consider that taking this policy is policy neutral in terms of GDP. So finally, this result reinforced the idea that policy action should be tailored by country and target several sectors altogether. And this is what we will focus in the next steps. Thank you so much. I hope that the connection worked well.
Thank you very much. Connection worked well at the end, so
Perfect.
we could hear your presentation, and you even still had time, so you could have taken time. There was no rush.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Well, I think that we can dig more then
Yes,
on the results.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we can move to the discussion part of the session, and so please once again put your questions into the chat. Yeah, let's see where the first question will arrive. Okay, maybe before I see a question, if I may ask myself, can you please,
Yes, totally.
Can you please explain more the mechanism? How do you implement these effects? Because you showed us some sectoral investments. So how does it work? You invest in certain sector, and then there are consequences and there are certain benefits and costs. So how do you implement this in the model?
Exactly. So what we do is that we implement we have from IASA gains model, we have the investment cost needed to reduce emissions. So what we do is that we take this information, we implement it, we insert that in EMV linkages model to see what is the overall effect in macroeconomic terms. This is the part of the cost. And in the part of the investment of the benefit, what we do is that we, since you have a reduction of concentration, I think that it would be easier if I share my screen, but so in the part of the benefit, what happened is that emission reduction would lead to less concentration of PM2.5, and therefore it would lead to increase on labor productivity, which is calculated.
Why would there be an effect on labor productivity?
Yes. Okay. There is empirical studies that suggest that high concentration of PM2.5 have reduced the number of days that you can go to job-related labor days.
Okay.
So what we have is the workday lost for this concentration.
Right.
And what we do is that we calculate the workday loss for each country, and we know how many days, total days, and this is how we calculate the labor productivity loss in particular. Mm-hmm. For the part of the health expenditure, what we have is a relation between hospital admissions and concentration of PM2.5, and how we calculate we have the cost by country, especially we take this information from the European Commission, and for the crop productivity loss is coming directly from the TNFAS model. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we calculate, we have a crop productivity in the EMV linkages, and we just implement it.
Okay, yes, I see. One more question still about this investment. So if I understand it well, how much does it cost to reduce the pollution? So you implement the investment needed, and then the end somewhere you have the pollution reduction. But does it also go through the channel? So if you reduce pollution, it means, for example, you need to adjust production structure. You need to change the way how the technology is working, maybe using more green inputs, etc. So that you also have somehow implemented in the model.
Exactly. So how we implement that part is that we create a shock, forcing the model to do the investment on the sectors that the input data set us that is needed to achieve this reduction of concentration. So, for example, we have in the agricultural sector, we said to them all that they need to do this investment after there is a real reallocation of the cost, meaning that this investment is since you are increasing the investment in one particular sector, all the rest of the sectors will have like more, like take more monetary values from there, and so all at the end the total investment would not be the total cost, in the economy will not be as much as the investment that is needed. I don't know if I. Yeah.
And so, for example, because I see there are still no questions. Oh yes, they are. So then I give the floor to somebody else. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say the question also. I think it's faster, maybe.
Okay. Yes. Please go.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for
John, how are you?
Thanks for the interesting presentation. I had a couple of questions on the labor productivity, or maybe there's more labor supply actually if people don't come to the work. But that doesn't really matter. Is it differentiated by sector? Some workers might be more exposed to air pollution than others, and you're focusing in this presentation on the sector dimension. Is this the same labor supply or labor productivity across the board, or do you have a differentiation by sector?
I have to say that this is a great question because it's something that we were thinking about, but from now is it affects labor supply as a whole, labor productivity as a whole. So if you think about it, emission reduction in the agricultural sector, even if it's the agricultural sector who does it, it affects the overall country, let's say. So at the end, you have less concentration level in all the country, so it affects similarly. It's something that can be studied, like if it should be differentiated by sector, actually. From now is overall, yeah.
And you show on that slide that it's the GDP by sector was the title, right? Is it an output by sector or value added, or what is the metric?
Okay, so the metric is GDP for the Arctic Council countries. So the metric is GDP share. So what is here appears as agricultural, more than sector, maybe it's not well explained, is what would happen if it's the agricultural sector who takes policy action in the overall economy. You see? So, for example, So, so implementation of the MTFR policies in the agricultural sector will come with benefit and cost, and overall in the economy would increase in the Arctic Council countries by 0.06%. That's why actually the increase is not as much, because there is not big changes. It's just one sector taking policy action. Does it make sense?
Okay, I get it now. Yeah,
sorry, my bad. Yeah, no, it's maybe not self-explained, I would say.
And of the three channels, which one do you feel is the strongest one?
About the three, unfortunately, I mean, I couldn't put all the information here. We are doing another report, you might know, on Northeast Asia. And in this report, for example, I think that in general, I would say that is the labor productivity, which affects the most, because it's the one that affects all the sector at the same time. So, for example, agricultural productivity is just for agriculture and health is just for health, but it only affect the health sector, while labor productivity is affecting all sectors at the same time.
Okay, thanks. I keep going, or if there are other questions. What do you assume if the extra healthcare expenditure does it then reduce the savings of the households, and then is there less savings available to do investment, and you get this dynamic effect also?
All this dynamic effect is included, yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay, and these are air pollution policies. We also know many of these countries are looking into climate policies. So to what extent would these investments still take place if they go for ambitious climate policy. So I understand these are kind of end of pipe investments. Do you think the majority of these would still be necessary in the coming years, or will the climate policy go so fast that it's not worthwhile anymore?
I think that there is co-benefit of implementing these policies. In terms of emission reduction, it's clear that taking these these policies that even if it's focusing only on air pollution, it reduce other pollutants such as CH4, which is a climate pollutant. But of course, and yes, I think that taking policy action to reduce climate change, at the end is like there are synergies between both of them. As you just mentioned, for example, some of the technology is the same. So when you are doing investment in end-pipe technologies, you will reduce in BC, for example, but you are also reducing maybe other climate change pollutants.
Okay, we still have time. Keep going. Oh.
Yes, if somebody else at this moment wants to ask a question, we have time. So please use your time and we can continue the discussion.
But I have maybe a broader question. So you see, for instance, for Russia, from questions more on political economy. Let's say you show that for Russia is not winning here. They are reducing GDP. So do you engage with policymakers in Russia on this topic, and do you try to still convince that this is worthwhile, or do you think this could be still implemented if other countries provide financial support, or are you active in this kind of debate with people in Russia?
I mean, I personally I'm not engaged of these political issues. It's like more high level people who do that, but yeah.
I can answer that if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
We do engage with Russia in the sense that as the OECD involves also non-member states in their discussion, Russia is one of the countries that are always present at our meetings. So they've been following the work from the start, and they've actually been very interested, supportive and engaged. Furthermore, when we did the launch of the recent report we published on this topic, we had the involvement of the 3 chairs of the Arctic Council working group on black carbon and methane. And Russia is the incoming chair, so they were also involved. That being said, we do not have an active role in the Arctic Council, so we do not try to convince them to do more. We're informing them, and then it's up to them to make the political decisions. But we've contributed to the process as much as possible for our role.
Thanks, very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Any other question from the audience? I think our audience is shrinking, I can see.
Oh, I hope that's not my fault.
So, well, although we are supposed to still continue, I think it seems that we can conclude. So, thank you very much for joining this session on Health in Europe, and please help me in thanking our presenters for their valuable and thought-provoking presentations. So we appreciate everybody joining us and hope you enjoyed the remainder of the conference. Thank you.